Welcome everybody to a review of the Apex AllStars car pack, and this is the first car in the car pack that we're going to be looking at. So because these are all racing cars, I'm going to be doing this car pack review a little bit differently to how I would normally do a car pack review, although granted I haven't done one for a while. So yeah, we're just going to look at the cars in terms of the open world, and then we'll get each one around the track. So yeah, this is the first one in the car pack. I'm going to be doing them in alphabetical order. So it's a 2018 BMW number 1 M Motorsport M8 GTE. So this sports 600 horsepower and 500 pounds-feet of torque from its 4-litre twin turbocharged V8 engine. And yeah, it weighs 2,910 pounds, has 50-50 weight distribution, and this car finished 5th in the 2018 to 2019 FIA World Endurance Championships and came in 2nd in the 2020 IMSA Sports Car Championship results as well. So reasonably successful car, especially given this is the first time they've raced the M8, I believe, on track, so that's pretty good. So yeah, most of these cars are in S2 class. There are 3 that aren't, but there's 7 in total, so yeah, 4 out of 7 is obviously most of them. So yeah, those are the stats as you can see. So not the best launch, but then these racing cars typically don't, because launch doesn't really come into, you know, these long endurance races. Braking and handling certainly come into those kind of races though, and the acceleration is fairly good as well. So yeah, I'm not a massive fan of racing cars, to be honest, so I am surprised that not only is this car pack entirely focused on them, but that the festival playlist that is coming up from Thursday after this video goes up is also focused on them entirely. But nonetheless, let's hear what this car sounds like, and then we'll talk about it some more. So yeah, it actually sounds pretty good, to be honest, and yeah, which is obviously not the norm for a lot of racing cars, given they're more focused on being as efficient and as powerful and as, you know, able to put the power down as much as possible. So yeah, sounding good and, you know, being fun in that regard isn't really the priority, but it does actually sound pretty good. And yeah, acceleration wise is also on the money as well. 0 to 60 is dealt with in 3.084 seconds. 0 to 100 is dealt with in 6.085 seconds, and it will go into a top speed of 200 miles an hour, which is despite all of the massive amounts of downforce that this is generating, with that front splitter that it's got going on, the giant rear wing and the rear diffuser on top of all of that. And obviously it does weigh a lot less than the normal M8. I think that also came with all-wheel drive originally as well, which this does not have, so that's another weight-saving measure on this car's part. And in terms of handling, yeah, it's just as good as you'd expect it to be for a racing car that is modern, which has a lot of aerodynamic properties, and the brakes are pretty good as well, and yeah, it's more than capable of dealing with all of that power that it's got going as well. So yeah, overall an impressive car. It's one of my more favourite ones out of this car pack, but it's not my absolute favourite. We've yet to see that one. So yeah, but still pretty damn good, and a solid start to this car pack overall. So let's get to the second car and see what that's in store for us. So I'm going to do as little editing as possible with this video, just because obviously there are 7 cars and that can take a damn while for me to do. And yeah, at the end of the day, like I said, I don't have a huge amount to talk about when it comes to racing cars. They are typically something I don't bother reviewing, just because there's so little to actually talk about in comparison to their road-going their road-going versions. So yeah, now we've got the 2015 Cadillac number 3 Cadillac Racing ATS VR. So this is the oldest car in the car pack. And yeah, it's got the same amount of horsepower as the BMW at 600 horsepower, but it's got slightly more in the way of torque at 520 pounds-feet, which is needed, to be honest, because this does actually weigh slightly more at 3,097 pounds. But yeah, that power comes from a 3.6 litre twin turbocharged V6 engine, the same kind of engine that the standard ATS comes with. And yeah, it's probably my least favourite out of this car pack, to be honest. I don't particularly like the sound of it, and yeah, handling and braking wise, it does feel a little bit behind the times in comparison to the likes of the BMW. So yeah, let's just take a look though. So yeah, this is an S1 class, so it's slightly lower than the BMW is, and as you can see, the handling is a little bit worse for the wear. I'm pretty sure the braking is slightly worse as well. I just can't quite remember the stats on the BMW. But yeah, the acceleration is also worse, the launch is worse, and the top speed is worse as well. So yeah, it's not particularly great in comparison to the BMW, and it's not particularly great in terms of, you know, racing cars in general, to be honest. So yeah, but nonetheless, let's once again hear what this car sounds like, and then we'll yeah, talk about it some more. Yeah, not a particularly great sounding engine, sounds too highly strung for my liking, and there's a lot of intake noise as well with those turbochargers, which are no doubt turned well up to get that extra bit of power and torque out of it, because the standard car didn't even produce 500 horsepower. But yeah, still 0 to 60 is dealt with in only 3.185 seconds, so that is still just over 0.1 of a second slower than the BMW. 0 to 100 is dealt with in 6.4 seconds, so that's nearly 0.4 of a second slower than the BMW, and it only has a top speed of 191 miles an hour, which yeah, is also slower than the BMW by 9 miles an hour. Still though, even though the handling stats and the braking is apparently worse than the BMW, there isn't a massive difference, to be honest. The biggest difference is the launch, but again, like I said with the BMW, launch is not much of a priority for these kind of cars, because yeah, getting off the line is on less than 1% of the overall race. So yeah, there's no real point in them trying to prioritise something like that, when at the end of the day it's very unlikely that will make or break a race in terms of winning it. So yeah, but yeah, it's perfectly fine in terms of handling. It's just nothing particularly special, and you can definitely tell it's not able to pull quite the same amount of G as the BMW is. Just doesn't feel like it quite has the aerodynamic efficiencies of that car. So yeah, nothing awful, but like I said, definitely my least favourite out of the car pack, which is a bit of a shame because I do kind of like the standard ATS. So yeah, so let's swiftly move on to the third car in this car pack, which is another American car. It's their first mid-engined racing car, I do believe. So let's quickly get into it. Luckily I have all of these saved as favourites, so we can quickly get to them. And yeah, it is the 2020 Chevrolet number 3 Corvette Racing C8R. So being based on the C8, it is the first mid-engined racing car from Chevrolet, I believe. It certainly is in terms of Corvettes. And yeah, as you can see, in comparison to the Cadillac, it's got better handling, way better brakes, much better launch, better acceleration, and better handling. And yeah, the Cadillac did have worse braking than the BMW as well, just wanted to check that. So yeah, the Corvette isn't the most powerful one though that we've got in this car pack. In fact, it's the second least powerful, I believe, as it has 500 horsepower and 480 pounds-feet of torque from its 5.5 litre naturally aspirated V8 engine. But it does weigh 2,910 pounds, which is the same amount as the BMW. But yeah, we are 100 horsepower down on that car and 20 pounds-feet of torque down on that car as well. So yeah, nowhere near as powerful as the BMW, but because this is mid-engined and rear-wheel drive, it is dynamically a little bit more unique, but also more efficient than the BMW is. And yeah, we're also in S2 class. I believe we're the same amount of PI as the BMW is. Let's quickly take a look. So yes, we are. So that is pretty good in that regard. But as you can see, the stats, acceleration is apparently better, but from the numbers that I've got, that's not entirely the case. But as you can see, the handling is only marginally worse. The braking is actually slightly better. The launch is better, and the top speed isn't that far off, to be honest. So yeah, that is overall pretty good. And yeah, this is the winner of the this actually in the 2020 24 Hours of Daytona came 4th in its class, so fairly decent position for it to come in, to be honest. But still, let's hear what this car sounds like, and then we'll talk about it some more. Yeah, pretty unique sounding V8 engine to be coming from a Corvette, but then being a racing car, it's bound to sound a little bit different. But it does actually sound, on the whole, really well, quite good. So yeah, that's a positive in its own right. And handling wise, even though it's not got quite as good a handling stat as the BMW, although the braking is slightly better, I actually think this handles a little bit better maybe than the BMW. It's certainly not going to have the same kind of understeer that that car will have, even though the BMW's engine is quite far back in up front to improve weight distribution. But yeah, because this has very little weight up front, being mid-engine and rear-wheel drive, it does have slightly better turning. Whether or not that means it's got better handling or not, you know, like certainly when it comes to being at the limit or anything like that, then that's another thing entirely. But yeah, 0 to 60 though is dealt with in 3 seconds dead, which is actually slightly quicker than the BMW by nearly 0.1 of a second. But 0 to 100 is only dealt with in 6.5 seconds, so that's nearly half a second slower than the BMW. And it's 3 miles an hour off the BMW at the top end, with a top speed of 197 miles an hour. But that is still fairly good, especially considering it's got less power than the BMW. No doubt has very nearly, if not as good a aerodynamic downforce, and yet despite that 100 horsepower difference, there's only 3 miles an hour in it at the top end. So that's fairly good. So yeah, overall a pretty good car. And yeah, this weighs 2,910 pounds like the BMW does. So it's got no extra weight to deal with despite the reduction in power and torque. But yeah, obviously that is not going to help it in the grand scheme of things if, you know, it's still dealing with less power while also dealing with the same amount of weight. It would have been better had it had the same kind of power and torque that it has, while also weighing less, but unfortunately that is not the case. So let's move on from America and let's go to Italy for our next car, which is the 2019 Ferrari number 62 Risi Competizione 488 GTE. So this, yeah, is a pretty good car overall, to be honest. It's kind of the best of both worlds from the likes of the Corvette and the BMW, because it's got the same kind of power as the BMW, as it has 600 horsepower, but it has slightly more in the way of torque at 538 pounds-feet from its 3.9 litre twin turbocharged V8, while also weighing only 2,910 pounds. So it weighs the same as a BMW, has the same horsepower as a BMW, but it has 38 pounds-feet of torque more, and it's got the smaller engine as well. so should be slightly more efficient when it comes to fuel economy. So, which again isn't massively important in some regards when it comes to racing, especially if it's only a short race. But if you're on a long endurance race, you want the car to be as fuel efficient as possible. So yeah, and in terms of stats, as you can see, slightly more than the Corvette in terms of handling, slightly less so in terms of the way of braking. Obviously it's got a way worse launch, but as you can see it's pretty much dead on with the BMW in a lot of ways. So yeah, very little difference between the BMW and this Ferrari outside of the way that they're actually set up. So obviously this is like the Corvette, it's mid-engine, it's rear-wheel drive, but it does have that extra bit of torque over the BMW. So yeah, but nonetheless, let's once again hear what this car sounds like, and we'll talk about it some more. So this is probably the one car in this car pack that actually sounds somewhat similar to the standard car. The previous vehicles haven't really sounded like their road-going counterparts. But not only does this car have the noise on its side, it also has the acceleration. It's easily the fastest to 60 out this car pack, as it can do 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. It also can do 0 to 100 in 5.984 seconds. I do believe this is the only car to also get to 100 in less than 6 seconds, and it will do 196 miles an hour. So it's not quite as quick as the Corvette and the BMW at the top end, but it's definitely quicker in terms of acceleration, and I feel like this has even better turning in the corners than the Corvette does. Obviously they are very similar in terms of the way that they are set up in terms of their handling stats, but yeah, I do feel like this has a slightly better turning. So yeah, this overall is a success from Ferrari. To be honest, it's only one of 3 European cars in this car pack. We have one from 2 more coming up from Germany, but still puts in a good showing for Europe overall, regardless of that. So yeah, this, if you want pure speed and good feedback from turning in on corners, then yeah, this is the car to go for, as it is comfortably the fastest in terms of just pure acceleration. So yeah, pretty good car overall, to be honest. It's, yeah, up there with my favourites, to be honest. Not quite my favourite, but still definitely more up there than, say, the Cadillac was. Right, so now we are moving on to Japan, as yeah, we have one of the newest cars here. Yeah, it's a joint newest with the Chevrolet, and like I said, it's from Japan, and it is a 2020 Lexus number 14 Vassar Sullivan RCF GT3. So yeah, this packs a pretty good punch in terms of its overall handling and braking stats. Not the best, obviously, but still pretty damn good, especially for a car that weighs 2,921 pounds. So it's slightly more than the BMW and the Ferrari and the Corvette by about 11 pounds. So, but to be honest, that's not that much, to be honest, considering this is obviously based on a much heavier car than most of those ones. But still, it only packs a punch of 500 horsepower, so the same as the Corvette, but it has way less torque at 405 pounds-feet, which is 75 less than the Corvette. But it does have a 5.4 litre naturally aspirated V8 engine, which is unusual because it's actually slightly larger than what you'd get in a normal RCF, which is usually only 5 litres. So yeah, that makes a change, to be honest, to show that Lexus really does like to go its own way when it comes to making road cars or race cars, quite frankly. So yeah, this is an S1 class, just like the what was it? The Cadillac. So we can compare it against that one. So yeah, we're 8.2 and 8.6 in terms of braking and handling. As you can see, the Cadillac is slightly worse in that regard. We also are slightly better in terms of weight of speed, but we do apparently have worse acceleration. So there is that. But yeah, still, this has one thing on its side, and it's something you are about to hear. So yeah, but still, this represents Lexus's first ever victory at the 12 Hours of Sebring in 2024 apparently. So it does have that going for it. But something it has even better going for it is the way this sounds. So let's hear what it sounds like, and we'll talk about it some more. Yeah, it sounds absolutely amazing, this V8 engine. It sounds properly dirty, and it just really just encourages you to rev the hell out of it, and I just absolutely adore the way this car sounds. And yeah, it's easily my favourite sounding engine in this car pack. Acceleration wise though, it is on the slight downside, 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds, so that's a full second slower than the Ferrari. 0 to 100 is dealt with in 7.8 seconds, so that's nearly 2 seconds slower than the Ferrari, and it's only got a top speed of 194 miles an hour, so again, slower than the Ferrari in that regard as well. So yeah, which isn't particularly impressive, but it's still a good handling car, even though it's dynamically a little bit more ordinary with the engine up front and rear-wheel drive. But that engine just sounds so good that I just don't really care. To be honest, it's yeah, definitely the one car out of this car pack that I can see myself revisiting just because of the way it sounds. Not because of the way it handles or the way that it brakes, because even though they are fairly decent, they are hardly class leading, and yeah, you can definitely do better from, you know, the class that this car is in out of this car pack in particular. So yeah, but yeah, the engine sounds so good that I'm just not bothered. And it was also quite unique in the fact that it's actually got a slightly larger engine than what you get in the road car, which I don't believe is typically the case. So yeah, they either have the same amount of cubic capacity and cylinders, or they are slightly smaller, but here, slightly larger, and yeah, it's all the better for it. And to be honest, I love the look of it as well. So yeah. Right, let's move on to the second to last car. It's our first German car in this car pack, I do believe. No, second German car. I forgot about the BMW. So yeah, we have 3 German cars in this car pack overall. A little bit weighted towards them, maybe. We could have easily have something from the UK, for instance, but still. Let's take a look at it. So this has the largest engine in the car pack, and yeah, you'll see why when we get to it. So yeah, it is the Mercedes-AMG GT3 from 2018, and yeah, handling wise it's slightly on the down low, but the braking is actually pretty good. But yeah, it does weigh more than the Lexus and the Ferrari. I think only the Cadillac weighs slightly more. Yeah, the Cadillac is the only one that weighs more than this, as this weighs 3,031 pounds, so the Cadillac's about 60 odd pounds more than this. But yeah, that's still quite a lot of weight, to be honest, but still, it looks the part, and yeah, for the most part it is handling and braking is pretty good as well. So yeah, this has, I forgot to tell you, 542 horsepower, so more than the Lexus, and 442 pounds-feet of torque, also more than the Lexus from its 6.2 litre naturally aspirated V8. So yeah, definitely the largest engine that we've got in this car pack by 700 cc's, with the Corvette being the second largest at 5.5 litres. And yeah, we're in S1 class again, slightly above the other cars. Oh, it did say 891 when we were going into this. So yeah, it is the same PI as the other ones. So as you can see, slightly worse in terms of handling than the Lexus, slightly better in terms of braking though, better acceleration, and way better launch as well on top of all of that. But for my money, even though this does have a decent sounding engine, it's not quite as good sounding as the Lexus, as you saw here in a second. So yeah, let's take a look at what this car sounds like before we talk about it some more. It's not quite as good in terms of sound as the Lexus, but still overall a pretty good sounding V8, although it's not quite my favourite. The Lexus definitely is, and I'd say probably the Ferrari or the Corvette is probably slightly more than this in terms of noise, but it's still pretty good in terms of handling and braking. It's just not quite up there with, say, the Lexus, but I would say that this feels like it's less likely to step out in terms of the rear end. We saw that with the Lexus and the Ferrari, they were tending to slightly outstep their rear end, so that has that on. This has that on its side. It's also got acceleration on its side as well. 0 to 60 in 3 seconds dead, and 0 to 100 in 6.6 seconds. But it has the second lowest top speed out of the cars on this car pack at 189 miles an hour. So yes, it's quicker in terms of acceleration over the Lexus in both respects, but it's also slower in terms of top speed. So yeah, which is surprising given this does have more power and more torque, so I guess it's the aerodynamics that are ultimately slowing this car down, but they at the end of the day are doing a good job. They might technically not be as good in terms of handling and braking them, or at least handling it over the Lexus, but like I said, because the rear end doesn't step out as much, I do have a bit more confidence in it in terms of sticking in the corners as quickly as possible. So yeah, handling wise it's definitely one of the more secure ones in terms of its rear end grip, which is obviously quite beneficial because obviously the more confident you can be with a car, usually the faster you can be as well. So yeah, right, so let's move on to the last vehicle in this car pack. It's also from Germany, but it's also the least powerful in terms of horsepower, the least powerful in terms of torque. It's also got the second smallest engine, or the third. It's a joint fourth smallest engine, I believe, but it does also have the slowest acceleration in both respects and also the slowest top speed. But does it have anything going for it? Well, let's take a look. So yeah, like I said again, once again from Germany, and it is the 2018 Porsche 911 GT3R. So as you can see, the handling is better than the Mercedes and the Lexus. It's also got better braking than both of those vehicles, and yeah, it's also the lightest car out of the car pack as well. The only one getting under 2,900 pounds, as it weighs 2,887 pounds. But like I said, it is the least powerful here at 493 horsepower and 338 pounds-feet of torque from its 4-litre flat-six engine. So yeah, by no means a powerful car here. Easily the least powerful in terms of horsepower and torque. But because it does weigh less than even the likes of the Lexus and the Ferrari, it means its power isn't quite getting as wasted on, you know, lugging around a load of weight. And yeah, as you can see by the stats, it's fairly good as well. Let's just quickly compare it. So just in comparison to the Mercedes, every respect apart from the top speed is actually better. So there is that. And being a Porsche, it's got the rear engine at the rear, along with rear wheel drive, so it does have plenty of weight over those rear wheels to help keep the grip on the ground. So it does have that going for it. But it also has the typical 911 thing of trying to kill you at any opportunities. So yeah, let's first take a look at what it sounds like, and then we'll talk about it some more. yeah, this has a second favourite engine noise out of the car pack. It's just so ballistically loud, and it revs all the way up to 9,000 RPM, making this easily the highest revving engine out of the car pack, which again is another bonus along with the lack of weight. But as I said, this is a typical 911 in the fact that it wants to kill you at any opportunity with, yeah, being on the rear-wheel drive while having that engine over the rear wheels. So yes, it does provide grip off the line and does work in tandem with the downforce when going quite quick, but when you're coming out of slower corners it does like to oversteer quite a lot. And like I said, the acceleration is also the worst out of any car here as well. At 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds and 0 to 100 in 7.8 seconds, and it will go to the top speed of 187 miles an hour. So yes, that 0 to 100 time is just as good as the Lexus, but the Lexus is about half a second quicker to 60, and that is also 7 miles an hour quicker at the top end. I did accidentally crash there because I was looking at my notes, but still, yeah, this sounds great, but not as good as the Lexus. It's better handling and better braking than the Lexus when it behaves, but when it doesn't, it's quite, yeah, oversteery. And even though I wouldn't say it's going to snap oversteer on you, it definitely does make racing a little bit trickier when you know you're going to have some issues at some point with that rear end stepping out. So yeah, but overall a likeable car pack. It's not my favourite by any means, purely because I'm just not particularly interested in racing cars, but this and the Lexus do overall make the car pack worth it, because they both sound great and they are interesting enough to drive and race around in. I'd then say the likes of the BMW and the Mercedes are not far behind. Then the Ferrari and the Corvette are kind of similar in a lot of ways, so they kind of join one another. And then the Cadillac is my least favourite of the bunch, but still, it's a decent car pack. If you are into your racing cars, this will be right up your street, just like the festival playlist will be, where we're getting, I think, at least 5 racing cars added to the game. One via the overall festival playlist points, which is a drag racer, and then the other 4 during each subsequent season. So yeah, it's not going to be a particularly wild month in terms of reviewing cars off this game, but it still should be at least a fun enough one to see what these cars can do in other respects, because obviously we've got how fast will it go, and I'm particularly interested to see what these cars can do on extreme off-road silly builds. So yeah, I look forward to using them in that kind of scenario, but yeah, outside of that, there's not going to be massive amounts of use for them for me personally, but hopefully there will be for you. But yeah, nonetheless, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.